Prepare for A Rood Awakening.
Shalom, this is Michael Rood in Jerusalem. I am here in the Ophel Gardens Archeological Park on the steps leading to the Temple Mount, Mount Moreh-Yah. In Hebrew, Har Moreh-Yah, the mountain where Yahweh will be our teacher. This is the most important mountain in the entire world. More blood has been shed on these few acres than on any other parcel of land on the planet. It is on the north peak of this mountain that Abraham prepared an altar of unhewn stone and bound his son Isaac to the wood of the sacrifice. On this same mountain, a male lamb of the first year, with his head entangled in a crown of thorns, was waiting as the substitute offering for Abraham's son. And it was here, on this mountaintop, that the sacrifices that were an integral part of the feast of the Lord were offered by the Levitical priesthood. When Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai, Israel was instructed to never sacrifice the Passover lamb inside the gates of their own cities, but they were to go up to the place where Yahweh would put his name, and that is where Israel would keep the rehearsal of the Passover. More than 500 years later, King David saw this very mountain by divine revelation, and he set out to take it from the Jebusites who were squatting on the land promised to the children of Abraham. David conquered the Jebusite city, which then became known as Ir-David, the city of David, ancient Jerusalem. He then purchased this mountaintop as the place where he would build the temple and institute the temple service. The temple service liturgy was developed by the prophets King David, Asaph, and Nathan. For the first time, they saw by divine revelation that the temple service was to be a shadow picture of the coming Messiah, David's descendant, who would literally be the fulfillment of the Passover sacrifice. And the fulfillment would happen right here in the city of Jerusalem. The Almighty had ordained this plan from the very beginning, and commanded his people to come up to the feast of Passover each year. If they obeyed his commandments and participated in the temple service during the feast, there would be no way for them to miss the moment when the Messiah arrived to fulfill the very rehearsals that they had been practicing for more than 1,000 years. This is the place where it was all planned, orchestrated, rehearsed, and finally took place. This is his story. Join us in the Lester Summerall television studios where this multimedia presentation was recorded. This is Bible Prophecy 101. Now, episode 8 in the 26-part series on the prophecies and the feast of the Lord, Mount Moreh-Yah, the mountain where Yahweh will be our teacher.
And so it is around the table that family then shares the bread and the wine, and that is the holy convocation that God set aside to be done in the family, with the father as the high priest of his home. And we see that even in the Brit Hadashah, in the New Testament, it indicates that there is only one head, and that is the Messiah. One head, and then all of us are all on the same level. But yet there is another head, and it is the head of the house. The husband is the high priest of that home, and he is directly underneath the Messiah as the head of that home. There's no pastor, there's no apostle or prophet that outranks the head of a house. The head of the house submits limited subjection to those who have ministries within the body of the believers, but it is that man who is responsible for his family and for training up his family. He is the high priest for his home, and it is in no other place that we see it as beautifully is at the beginning of Shabbat, when it's like we turn the light switch off to the world. And we say, we don't need your money, we don't need your entertainment, we don't need the world. God is our sufficiency, and he said that all we had to do is rest in him, and he would take care of these things. So now, in the day of the at the sixth millennium and at the last time getting ready for the Sabbath millennium, we see there is some work to be done. There is some house cleaning to be done. And this is what we are doing now, because in the Sabbath we will see the Messiah reign, and it says there remains a rest, a Sabbath for the children of God. And it is the Messiah's millennial reign that we look forward to. That is the weekly Sabbath, but yet then we see that there are also, as it goes on, seasonal feasts. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons. And these are determined by the barley crop in the land of Israel to start out the month of the Aviv. And as it says in Deuteronomy, 3 times a year you will go up to the rehearsals at the place that I shall choose out of all the tribes to put my name. And so Jerusalem was a place that was chosen by God because this is where all the rehearsals would take place, because the fulfillment of the rehearsals when the Messiah comes will be taking place at that very location. So I'd like to take you to the city of Jerusalem and to the map of Jerusalem, and this is the old city as it currently stands. And you'll see on your right-hand side, you have the Kidron Valley that goes around and joins the Hinnom Valley, or the Valley of Gehenna. Up the middle is the Tyropoeon, or the Cheesemaker Valley. It forms the Mount of Olives on the right, Mount Moriah in the middle, the Temple Mount, and Mount Zion. The highest peak of Mount Moriah to this very day is still north of the city wall of Jerusalem. And this becomes very important as I take you into the Mount Moriah, but you can see that the valleys form the Sheen, which is the first letter in Shaddai, or Almighty God, and it forms God's mark upon the land. And I want you to go with me and stand here in the Tyropoeon Valley and look over toward the Mount of Olives and look directly at the side of Mount Moriah. Here you are, standing, looking at the side of Mount Moriah. It was there, Mount Moriah, that God instructed Abraham to take his son Isaac to the mountains of Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice upon one of the mountains of Moriah, which he would show him. And so it was as Abraham approached Mount Moriah from the Negev, from the south, he brought his son with him, and the servants were bringing along with them the wood for the sacrifice and all that was necessary for the sacrifice. And as the servants of Abraham and Isaac, all approached from the south, when they got to the lower peak of Mount Moriah, indicated by this blue line, that is where Abraham told his servants to wait here. Do what I say, wait here, that my son and I are going to go in sacrifice, and then we were going to come again. And so it was there on the smaller peak of Mount Moriah that then the servants of Abraham took the wood of the sacrifice, put it on the shoulders of Isaac, and Abraham said, "Son, follow me." And Isaac then said, "Well, Father, I have the wood of the sacrifice. The servants have put it on my shoulder. I'm carrying the wood of the sacrifice on my shoulder. Where's the lamb?" And the father Abraham said, "God will provide himself a lamb. Follow me." And Isaac, the son, followed the father up to the highest peak of Mount Moriah, as you see indicated on the left here. And there it is where Abraham built an altar of stone. Then he put the wood of the sacrifice on the altar of stone and bound his son to the wood of the sacrifice. Then Abraham took his knife, raised it up to strike it across Isaac's throat, and right then the angel of the Lord stopped him and said, "God knows that you will not withhold the life of your son." And God provided a ram which is caught in the thicket, a male lamb of the first year, and that was a substitute for the son at that time, the time that the first rehearsal was put in place at the city of Jerusalem. Now you can see, as you look down upon the city, exactly where these things took place. On the lower peak is where the Temple Mount was eventually built, and at the highest peak of Mount Moriah is where Abraham took Isaac, prepared an altar of stone, bound his son to the wood of the sacrifice. Many years later, they began building a wall around the city of Jerusalem. And the wall on the north side of the city is only about 12 to 15 feet tall. How do you defend a wall that tall? What they did is they quarried out all of the stone in front of that wall because Mount Moriah is excellent quarry material. They removed it and built the wall of the city of Jerusalem. And then we see that the masonry is only about 12 feet high at the highest peak, but yet you have the sheared away mountain and it makes the wall effectively about 60 feet tall. And there, of course, you see the location of the temple in which it was built later. Now, in this particular shot, superimposed over this drawing is a picture out of an archaeological resource in the city of Jerusalem that shows that the wall, which is pictured there in brown, the wall of masonry is only about 12 feet high there. And then you see carved into the side, you see this is what is referred to as Solomon's Quarries. Because that stone was so valuable, Solomon then chiseled into the side of Mount Moriah, and that is where the stone was taken out to build Solomon's temple many years later. Right there in front of Solomon's Quarries in the old roadbed, this is the area that Josephus said at one time the Romans had over 2,000 Jewish men hanging on crosses along that wall there. They actually ran out of lumber in the city of Jerusalem and had men waiting in line up to a week for the next cross to become available because it took up to a week to be tortured to death on the Roman crosses. Now, they did not crucify men on hills far away. They crucified them right in the roadbed. In this area that was excavated down through there, numerous 2-foot deep sockets chiseled into the solid rock roadbed have been found in there, and I've held in my hands numerous 9-inch nails that were brought up from that site because of the thousands of execution of the Jews that had taken place there. This is what became known as the place of the skull, and that's where the executions were done. And when they sunk those crosses into those 2-foot deep sockets, then you were looking eye to eye, face to face with your brother, your father, your next door neighbor. And you just had to sit there in front of them and watch them day after day as the life bled out of them. Up to a week it took. A very torturous death. Here you can see the wall of Jerusalem. Now this one is about 20 feet high, but then you can see how Mount Moriah is sheared off, and then of course there's a lot of debris in that particular area.